Today we're going to rank every starting point guard in the NBA 1 through 30. The point guard position in the NBA is so deep. I think easily 2/3 of the league legitimately feels pretty good about their options at that position, whether that be based on performance, talent, or potential of the guy that they've got in their starting role. And for these rankings, I'm trying to find the blend of all of those things, while also taking a stab at how I think each team's GM feels about their starting point guard situation, going into next season specifically. In some cases, that means projecting who's going to be that starter in the first place. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it. At number 30, I've got the Washington Wizards with Malcolm Brogdon. Brogdon is a better player than some of the other guys on this list, but he's never healthy, and he's definitely not a long-term plan for the Wizards, who I'm not sure have a long-term plan. At 29, I've got Kyle Lowry from the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm looking at the Sixers roster and thinking that Lowry might actually have to be their starting point guard, and not because they want him to be. I think their preference would be to start Maxey at the 1 and bring Lowry in as a vet off the bench. But they don't really have a good option at the 2 at the moment, which means that's likely where Maxey's going to be. So he can't start at both positions, which means Lowry at the 1, I guess. At 28, it's Dennis Schroeder from the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are tanking and would probably love to trade Schroeder, who was actually way better for them last year than I think anyone expected or even wanted to be the case. At 27, the Portland Trail Blazers with Scoot Henderson. It was a pretty disappointing rookie year, but I have to believe that the Blazers intend to start him this year, and he's definitely capable of improving. I'm sure they still feel okay, even if he didn't sniff the Rookie of the Year conversation, as was the expectation when they drafted him. At 26, give me the Phoenix Suns' Tyus Jones. The Suns should feel pretty good about getting Tyus Jones. He lets Booker and Beal stop pretending that they're point guards and allows them to focus on who they really are, scorers. But he might just be too much of a low-cost rental, playing for a contract next season than a long-term option. Otherwise, I might have him higher on this list. At 24, I've got the Utah Jazz with Keyonte George. I think it was a super underrated rookie year for Keyonte George, and I'm probably higher than most on him personally. And I would think that the Jazz would actually be pretty optimistic about him. But then they played him and Walker Kessler in Summer League, which I thought they had clearly graduated past that stage in their careers, so maybe they're not as high on him as I am. At 24, I've got LaMelo Ball with the Charlotte Hornets. Definitely more talented than guys ahead of him on the list, but there's no way that the Hornets feel super good about it. They have to be terrified going into next season that their max level investment and hope for their franchise is going to spend half the year in street clothes. Again. At 23, I've got the Miami Heat with Terry Rozier. It didn't look great, and he wasn't healthy after he got to Miami, but this dude is still a 20-point per game scorer on a team that's often in need of scoring. They have to feel pretty good still about their chances of getting the benefit of that next year with a full offseason of Heat culture. At 22, I've got Emmanuel Quickley with the Toronto Raptors. The rumors around the OG trade was that the Raptors were actually more interested in Quickley than they were RJ Barrett from the Knicks, which if that's true, then I imagine they feel pretty good. It still feels to me like the only sure thing in Toronto right now is Scotty Barnes, and everything else is subject to change depending on the opportunity, and I think that probably includes Quickley. At 21, give me the Orlando Magic with Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs might not be a traditional point guard necessarily, but with the addition of KCP, I think he slides right into the 1 and he does it just fine. They're going to run the offense through Franz and Paolo, and he'll focus on making the other team's backcourt completely miserable on a night-to-night basis, which he's elite at. And if the shooting from last year is real, it's just another thing to be optimistic about for the Magic. At 20, give me Coby White with the Chicago Bulls. After a breakout performance, the Bulls should be super happy with Coby White, even if they're not happy with, well, literally anything else on their roster, which might actually make them even happier than they should be about their point guard spot. At 19, I've got the LA Lakers with D'Angelo Russell. D'Lo was the third best player for the Lakers and the most important player not named LeBron or AD last season. The problem is, That wasn't the Lakers' plan. They expected Austin Reeves to be that third guy, and he just didn't quite become that, and they've been trying to trade D'Lo and just couldn't get anything done. Not at the deadline, not this offseason. He's not been particularly good in the playoffs, and while he's very talented, and I do root for him personally, I don't think that they can feel totally great about what they've got going on right now in LA at the point guard position. At 18, it's Mike Conley with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Not to pile on the Lakers, but I often find myself imagining a world where they just took Conley in that trade instead of routing him to Minnesota so that they could reunite with D'Lo. If I was in their front office, that move would keep me up at night, and the Wolves should feel great about it. Still, and the only reason he's not higher on this list is because he's getting ready to turn 37, and 6-foot guards in their late 30s have a tendency to have the end happen more abruptly than some other player types. I truly hope that's not the case though with Conley. I've been a legitimate fan of his since his senior year of high school, and I want to see him play until he's 100. At 17, I've got Chris Paul with the Spurs. Speaking of old 6-foot guards, Chris Paul would have been way lower on this list if he was still in Golden State. Well, honestly, he wouldn't even have made the list because he wouldn't be their starting point guard, and he would have also been paid way more money. But pairing him with Victor Wembanyama, who is probably already the most prolific lob catcher we've maybe ever seen, and has the hype of a future GOAT, I said hype. If you were the Spurs front office and could choose any veteran point guard to bring in to set up Wemby, how many names would you list off before you got to Chris Paul? I think 3 years ago, the answer might actually be 0. And even at his advanced age, I still don't think that list is very long. At 16, I've got the Houston Rockets with Fred VanVleet. He's just solid. He was solid for Houston last year. He'll be solid for them again this year. He's a veteran presence in a locker room full of young, talented guys with a ton of upside. He's not a star necessarily, but I think the Rockets still feel pretty good about that particular investment. At 15, I've got Cade Cunningham with the Detroit Pistons. I don't know how many things there are to feel optimistic about if you're the Pistons front office. Cade Cunningham is one of them, even if he might be the only one of them. You're happy with the production, you just hope he can be a little bit more available and cut down on some of the turnovers. But the problems in Detroit are not named Cade Cunningham. At 14, it's Darius Garland with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was a setback-filled year for Garland last year, but I would remind you that he broke his jaw, spent weeks with it wired shut, and on an all-liquid diet. He lost a bunch of weight and just didn't seem to have his rhythm when he came back. It's almost impossible to gain strength and weight during a season because of how much cardio these guys are doing, so I truly believe he just needs an off-season to get his body right again, and the confidence is going to follow. That being said, if your team's starting point guard gave you 18 points per game, 6.5 assists, and shot 37% from 3 on volume in a bad season, and was still only turning 25, you'll take that every time. At 13, I've got the Denver Nuggets with Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray will tell you he's the best point guard in the league that isn't an all-star. He might be right. He also might have the ideal skill set to pair next to Nikola Jokic. The only thing you're worried about as the Nuggets front office is whatever happened at the Olympics and the injury history. He's missed a lot of games dating all the way back to when he was just 22 years old. Generally speaking, those guys don't become Iron Men at 27. I know there are questions about his contract situation. He agreed to an extension and then he didn't agree to the extension. It's still not signed, and all that stuff is going to get worked out. And I think the Nuggets are still going to feel good about their point guard spot in their pursuit of another title. At 12, I've got DeJounte Murray with the New Orleans Pelicans. You could argue the biggest problem the Pelicans had last year was point guard play. CJ McCollum, while he's still a really good player, wasn't the facilitator that he even was when he first got to New Orleans. And he's not a natural facilitator to begin with. Enter DeJounte Murray, who has more size and managed more assists on a Hawks team where he had to share a backcourt with Trae Young. In his last season with the Spurs, he was a 9 assists per game guy. Even if the truth lies somewhere in the middle, he should fill a serious need on this roster, and the front office should be truly stoked about having him, especially considering he didn't cost that much to get him in the door. That brings us to number 11, which I've got the Memphis Grizzlies, Ja Morant. 2 years ago, this dude is at or near the top of this list, and talent-wise, he still would be. but we know the deal at this point. Multiple suspensions and a season-ending injury after only being back to play in 9 games. Reports say he's back to playing basketball, and as of this moment, the off-court stuff seems to be behind him. He has yet to clear 70 games in a season, though, in his career. The only year he would have even made the new 65-game minimum for awards was his rookie season. I'm not saying the Grizzlies are panicking, because when this dude plays, he's in legitimate MVP conversations. You just might be losing sleep every night hoping that he can stay on the court. Kicking off the top 10, I've got Jrue Holiday from the defending champion Boston Celtics. As the kids would say, Jrue is finally getting his flowers. At least, I think they still say that. But it's honestly coming too late, kind of like that pop culture reference may also be. He's still really good at what he does and deserves every compliment you can give a guy, but his peak was in New Orleans. At 34, while maybe not as impactful on the box score, he might still be the most impactful player for the Celtics locker room though. When you consider the production and the role that he plays mixed with his leadership, everywhere he's been, they rave about how great of a guy he is in the community and for his teammates, and the only thing the Celtics are unhappy about is that they don't have a fountain of youth that can keep him young and on this team permanently. But whatever they're giving Al Horford might be the closest thing, so you never know. At number 9, I've got the Los Angeles Clippers with James Harden. It's hard for me to put Harden as a point guard. He's one of those heliocentric guys that runs the offense but like guards wings on defense. Essentially the case with Luka, even LeBron. These guys run the offense, but they're doing it while playing with a point guard who just plays off the ball more. At least that's how it used to be with Harden. He still doesn't guard point guards much, but he's also not playing with one. He is the closest thing to it for the Clippers, scoring less and facilitating more. He has become their point guard, and he's good at it. He is getting old. He is not a superstar level player consistently anymore, but he's still that talent on a given night, and they traded a lot for him and paid him a lot of money. Basically chose him over Paul George, so they must at least feel pretty good about it. At number 8, I've got De'Aaron Fox from the Sacramento Kings. Fox sort of manages to go under the radar a little bit, but he's put together a couple of elite level seasons in a row. And the team actually had a nearly identical record last year as when they were the 3 seed, but the conference got better around them and some guys regressed around Fox, like Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray's 3-point shooting, for example. But Fox has been really good without getting a ton of praise for it, but I imagine the front office is still very, very happy with their guy. At 7, give me Dame Lillard in Milwaukee. If the Bucks had the chance to go back and make the Dame trade over again, do you think they still do it? Yeah, I think they do. Just about everything that could go wrong did, but it's still Damian Lillard. If he and Giannis can gel a little better coming into the season, the Bucks still have to feel like their top 2 guys are as good as anybody in the league or better. At number 6, I've got Trae Young in Atlanta. Trae Young is polarizing and might be as bad of a defender as there is in the NBA. He also might not be very fun to play with, given that he controls every moment of every offensive possession. But there's also a reason for it. He's really good at it. As good of an offensive talent as there is in the league, and the type of player that teams tank for. Atlanta pulled the plug on the Murray experiment, so there's no question that unless they blow it up, they have their guy, and they're happy about it. Jumping into the top 5, I've got Kyrie Irving with the Dallas Mavericks. I know I'm going to hear about how Luka is the point guard and Kyrie is the shooting guard. I just don't really see it that way. I see Luka as a LeBron-type player that I mentioned earlier, a wing that runs the offense while playing next to a point guard-sized player who plays well off the ball. And one of the best to fit that description for both LeBron and Luka has been Kyrie Irving. It was a Hail Mary when they made the trade to get him in the first place, and last year, it worked better than even they probably ever thought it could. I'm guessing they lose sleep at night about whether Kyrie is going to stay focused on basketball, but they're definitely stoked about the basketball. At number 4, I've got the Indiana Pacers' Tyrese Halliburton. He might be the best facilitator in basketball. If he doesn't get hurt, he's one of the brightest young stars in the league. The Pacers make that Sabonis trade 100 times out of 100 and are super happy with their point guard to build their team around, hopefully for the next decade. At number 3, I've got Jalen Brunson with the Knicks. The team is obviously crazy happy about Brunson. He's either related to or best friends with seemingly everyone in the building at this point, and he's turned into a superstar, which nobody thought was going to be happening, including Brunson, as evidenced by the fact that he reportedly was willing to sign for like $50 million in Dallas, and they were the ones that said no. Now, he's the best contract in basketball, one of the biggest stars in one of the biggest cities on the planet. At number 2, it's Steph Curry with the Warriors. It might only be for a couple more years, but Steph is still that dude. You can't help but marvel at what he's capable of doing on the basketball court, and he's going to have a statue in front of the building when it's all said and done. So I'd say the front office is still pretty happy to have him around. And did you happen to see the gold medal game? And that leaves us with number 1, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Oklahoma City Thunder. A legit MVP candidate who's only 26 years old and leading the youngest 1 seed in NBA history. At least as far back as seeding was a thing, OKC literally couldn't be happier with the guy that they got in that Paul George deal. And the future is as bright as any franchise we've probably ever seen at this stage since they, well, had KD, Russ, and Harden together. But I think this foundation actually feels more solid than even that one did. And I think they believe they're poised to be at the top of the league for the next decade plus. My question for you in the comments is, which NBA franchise is happiest about their starting point guard situation? And before I go, I just wanted to say thank you. The channel just reached 500 subscribers recently, and I know that I've got a long way to go to catch Mr. Beast, but that is a huge deal to me. I work really hard on these videos, and it means a lot to me that you watch them and that you have subscribed to the channel. And if you're somebody that hasn't subscribed to the channel and you're watching this right now, go ahead and click the subscribe button. And while you're down there, also like the video, please, so that YouTube knows that, it doesn't suck.